it is Tuesday the 24th of June 2025, and I'm here with a very special guest who I'm going to ask to introduce themselves shortly. We're at the University of Sydney, and we're here talking about the history of social work here at the university and how that has contributed to the bigger picture of social work and the profession more broadly. Can you please introduce yourself?
I'm Michael Horsburgh, and I first joined the staff of the Sydney University at the beginning of 1972, and I retired on this day in 1999 when I turned 60. And prior to that I was a student and had other roles within the University of Sydney. And I was first a student here in 1956.
Amazing. Love everything about this, Michael. The history of this place is reflected in your engagement, and I am so delighted to be able to have this shared conversation with you. Noting also, as you've just sort of alluded briefly before, that today is your birthday.
86th birthday.
Happy birthday. That's amazing, because I know you had said that on this day you had retired when you turned 60, so today is your birthday. In the 86 years, obviously, that you've been around, and a large majority of that time actually has been connected to the University of Sydney. Tell me more about what it's been like being involved here at the University of Sydney, especially in the social work space.
Okay. Well, I came to the university as a part-time student in 1956 as a Bachelor of Arts degree, and I was actually 16 when I started, because in those days we had only 5 years of secondary education.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started as a part-time student. In 1961, I became a theological student for the then Methodist Church, and the church put me into Wesley College and the University of Sydney.
Mm-hmm.
And so I then and I completed my arts degree, and then I asked social work for admission, and I asked the church to pay for it, because I said I thought that social work education was a useful thing for somebody who was going to be a parish clergyman.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't the first person Methodist minister to do that. There's quite a long history of Methodist clergy involvement in social work at Sydney University.
Okay.
And so I enrolled in the then Diploma of Social Work, and which I completed, and I did my final placement in the first 3 months of 1964, while I was also completing theological studies.
Right.
In 1965, I was appointed to a parish in Newcastle, and while I was there, I got a letter from the vice master of my old college, Wesley College, asking me whether I would like to become the next vice master. So I applied, and I got the job, which I started at the beginning of 1966, and I was the vice master of the college and chaplain to Methodist students. So I found myself on the campus, and John Lawrence, who was still on the staff at Sydney then, invited me to do casual teaching. So I started doing casual teaching and things. And when he went on a sabbatical leave, he invited me to take more classes, and he then went to the University of New South Wales, and Tony Vincent took his place, and I did things for Tony. And then when I won't now go into all the difficulties of Wesley College during the time I was there, which were considerable.
Okay.
But by the time I got to the early 70s, it was clear for various reasons that I didn't have much of a future in the Methodist Church. I had been doing some part-time teaching at the University of New South Wales for John Lawrence, and then there was when Tony Vincent left, there was a vacancy here, and I applied for that and got it. So I then had been in 1972. I started as an assistant lecturer, and then I went through promoted lecturer, senior lecturer, associate professor, and teaching social policy, and firstly along the lines that John Lawrence had taught me, because I was a student when John Lawrence first arrived, and he was my first social policy teacher, and indeed I owe my teaching career to John, for his support and for his giving me opportunities to do things that I might otherwise not have had the opportunity to do. And of course I was on the campus, so I was on hand, as it were, and so I was available. So the teaching of social policy was first bound up with teaching of sociology. There was a course called Social Theory 1, and then a course called Social Theory 2. Social Theory 1 was an introductory sociology course, and Tony Vincent was very interested in that, but Social Theory 2 was the social policy bit of the social work degree, and both those courses, Social Theory 1 and Social Theory 2, were available to arts students in the University of Sydney. And it's on Social Theory 1 that the present sociology courses in Sydney are built, because they expanded and within the social work department. And so all the early sociology teachers were in social work, and they stayed in social work until social work moved into education, and then they remained behind in arts, whereas the social work went off to education.
And what year was that?
It's in the early 2000s, early 2000s. Yes. It's it's in my history. The exact dates escape me, but it's we sat in a very uneasy position in the Faculty of Arts, because social work was a professional course, and it didn't sit well with the interests of the Faculty of Arts, and we were always struggling to get our share of the money and resources out of that. And education turned out to be a much better location, because, well, firstly, it was a professional course, and secondly, it had forms of field education, and so we fitted better in education.
And that was its own faculty until I believe around 2016, 2017.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
When it was then made into a school within back the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences. But the same preface around being part of the same school of education and social work still remains. That idea that we are professionally facing degrees.
Yeah, yeah. While I was when I started, they were just introducing the what's called the Bachelor of Social Studies degree, which combined the former BA DIPSOC combination, and I subsequently changed the name to Bachelor of Social Work because I thought it was the Bachelor of Social Studies was a hangover from the perception of the university that social work wasn't a proper academic pursuit, and that prejudice existed from the very point in 1940 when the teaching of social work entered the university from its former location.
Yes.
And so the social studies name gave social work appearance of being proper study because it was studies, not work. And so, but when I thought the time was right, I got a change to social work.
So you were actively involved. What year was that?
It was, I think, the late 80s, early 90s. I think, yeah.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. And I also introduced the higher doctorate, what was originally a Doctor of Social Work, and that was later changed to a professional degree, and the Doctor of Letters and Social Work became the higher doctorate. But it seemed to me that once we got into all that, we needed the capacity to stand academically in our own right, without hanging on the shirt tails of anybody else in the Faculty of Arts or anybody. We had to be our own persons. And it was during my time also we introduced the adult learning models of social work education. I was head when that happened. So there's been a lot of changes in the time I've been involved in it. And of course, when I first started as a student, the pioneers of social work education were still teaching.
And they were, can you name some of those?
Well, in particular, Norma Parker.
Yes.
She was a, and I would say Mary McClelland also. They are people of, they're women of great stature who were never properly recognised. And indeed, I was the first person with social work qualifications to be appointed associate professor in university.
Wow.
And Mary McClelland should have been an associate professor. And Norma Parker got to be an associate professor when she moved with John Lawrence to the University of New South Wales. But all they ever got was to be senior lecturers. And getting somebody with social work education beyond senior lecturer was an actual achievement, and I think it was important for the Oh, well, important for me, obviously. I got the promotion, but it was important for the stature
Yes.
of it, and opened the way for other people to succeed me.
I see what you're saying. So by virtue of us being able to have higher levels of positions, academic positions or ranking at a university, it esteems the discipline and provides a level of visibility, but even respect for that discipline.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm hearing. What's been your understanding of the University of Sydney's role in the social work profession over the many years that it's been running social work?
Well, until relatively recently, I'm talking about the period that New South Wales came on, and then other universities in New South Wales. Sydney was the only place in the state of New South Wales where you could get a social work education. So without us, there's nothing else.
Because when did UNSW come online with social work?
Now, when did John go? It came on during the early 70s.
Yes.
I think that's the early 70s. That's if my recollection is correct.
Yes, so prior to that, in 1940, when we started social work.
There's only Sydney.
Yes.
And then you've got Melbourne.
Yep.
And you've got Adelaide.
Yes.
But you've got nobody else.
Yes.
There's no Brisbane, there's no Western Australia.
Yep.
So there's only three, and Sydney was the first, and so in essence, Sydney University is the origin of social work in New South Wales, and was instrumental in the other courses arising, because I remember that when Western Sydney started to come on, which I think is where
yes, that's where I came from. That was in the mid-90s.
Mid-90s. Yeah, I was on a committee of advice for Western Sydney, because they had to have processes of setting this up, and they had to show that they had to set it up in such a way that it would be suitable, acceptable to university, but also had to be acceptable to ASW, and so I was on a committee of advice helping to set it up, and many of the teachers and things were my students, and who had been students, and so there we've not only produced a social work, we've also produced social work educators as well, and that's
totally. So I'm having a moment for the recording, because that's amazing, because you're part of the reason as to why I was able to complete social work at Western Sydney Uni, because you were involved in the development and implementation of that degree there. Wow, that's amazing, because I could probably name one of your previous students that then came on board to help out, Neil Hall. He's he's now an Associate Professor at Western Sydney Uni, so shout out to Neil. But he was one of my original lecturers, and actually was involved in offering my first position at Western Sydney Uni after I finished my PhD back in 2011. But again, your legacy, because I wanted to move to that as well, your legacy in social work. But it sounds, as you said, the University of Sydney has been quite instrumental in being able to influence and impact forms of social work education, very much so. What's your take on how the University of Sydney has also helped influence social work practice and our engagement also in policy and research?
Yeah. Well, there are two things. I think personally, I always took as I said before the course started, my appointment as a part-time member of the then Social Security Appeals Tribunal was, while I was still on the university staff, was a changing point in my own view of social policy, in that I came to realise that despite all of the theory and all of the government policy statements and the white papers and all the legislation, the social policy is actually what the people get. And that's how the citizens, who are the recipients at the end line, get. That's what the policy is, and there's a lot of steps between getting a concept of something and producing it to an actual service on the ground, and you can have all the legislation and writing about it that you like, but the on-the-ground decisions can be, and applications can be quite different in reality from what people thought they were going to be. And I also formed a view about the practicality of knowledge. There's a temptation amongst academics to want to know more and more and more before you come to any conclusion. But in policy terms, you have to think, if I knew that, or if I knew more, what difference would it make to the actual outcome? I might think to myself that I'm much better informed, but I could have spent a lot of time getting that information and it wouldn't have made any difference on the ground. And so this is not an argument against information or knowledge. In terms of social policy, it's an argument for practicality and seeing what people actually get, because that's the whole point of the social policy, is that the people get the benefit. And since I've been a long time, in fact 45 years part-time member of administrative appeals tribunals, I've seen a lot of changes in government policy, many of which I've disagreed with quite profoundly. And people said to me, how can you administer these policies that you don't agree with? And my response has always been, regardless of what the policy is, the citizens are entitled to the best deal that they can get out of the policy, the best outcome that they can get. I can't change the policy, but as an reviewer of administrative decisions, I can ensure that they get the best deal that they can, and that's because I hold the view about beneficial legislation. Beneficial legislation is legislation that's intended to do good to people, and it's not criminal law intended to catch them and punish them, or it's not machinery law to make corporations or governments run better or something. It's designed specifically to provide some benefit to people, and in a situation like that, who gets the benefit of the doubt, if there's a doubt? In my view, the punter always gets the benefit of the doubt. The government, I never give the government the benefit of the doubt. I always give the citizen, the appellant, the benefit of that. And that's the kind of social policy that I always wanted to teach.
I love everything that you're saying, by the way. It's so reflective of what social work values, principles, practices should be oriented towards, right? Creating responsive, inclusive societies that are based on what's happening for people as opposed to system structures and services.
Yeah. Well, the system structure and services are important. I mean,
sure.
otherwise nothing comes out.
That's right.
You've got to have all that, and so, but you need to, from a policy point of view, from my policy point of view, you need to work not only from the top down, you need to work from the bottom up.
I agree.
I'm not saying that you should only do one of them, because you've got to do both of them.
Yep.
And you've got to do both of them properly.
Yep.
And they have to meet somewhere in the middle. So because you can't deliver Australia's social security system without a huge machinery.
Totally.
It's not possible.
Totally, and I think that's the point, right? There's no point putting together and implementing systems, social systems, structures and services, if it's not influenced and nuanced by the people in which it's intended to serve.
Yep, that's right, and that's an important thing. And I said to my students whenever the subject arose, I said, particularly with social security, but with other things, I said, you should have a view about your clients. They should always claim a benefit. You should, because the only decision that counts is the decision made by the person who's authorised to make decisions. And so you can go along, for example, to a Centrelink office and say, am I eligible for this, and the person over the counter can say, no, you're not eligible. That person's not a decision maker. That person is a front of house counter person. No, I'm not downgrading them. I mean, they're doing an important job, but they've got to see what their job actually is, and it's to give advice, it's to help people to do things at the front of house. But they're not decision makers. And if you really want to know whether a person's qualified for something, you have to lodge a claim. And my other view was always appeal. If you don't get what you want, always appeal. And if you want to do some good for your clients, I say to students, you want to do some good for your clients, you need to keep both those things in mind, because you'd be surprised what can happen.
Because it goes back to, again, the system being responsive. If we don't have that appeal process, the system can't be responsive. That's right. There's a level of accountability as well, but also it's about taking on that critical feedback to understand how the system is actually being implemented and potentially engaging and or not with its people. Yeah. Yep. Powerful.
Yeah.
Powerful. So it sounds like you've had a very rich career, both as an academic, but someone that has also influenced different parts of social work. What's that journey mean for you, especially because I know you've come, the reason why we're doing this recording is you came to have this meeting with me today because you wanted to officially mark your honorary appointment, not necessarily continuing on, because you wanted to sort of preface that with more of a signposting and a celebration of your engagement as an honorary, and we're so grateful for that. On broader reflection, what has it meant for you to be a social worker and have your engagements across the different areas of work and institution?
That's a in one sense it's a really difficult question. What's my whole life mean?
That's a simple question. A platform, hopefully, a springboard.
Yeah. I said earlier that I started out a theological student and things. I don't think I would have made a very good parish minister. It's not that I think I don't have the pastoral skills, but I think at heart I'm a teacher, and so that's and I've always been better at conveying, or not conveying knowledge in a direct sense, but encouraging teaching and learning. And it's learning rather than teaching. But a teacher, that's the teacher's role, is to encourage learning. And so I think I've always been better at that than anything else. And that's what I like to do, and it's what I think I've done. But it's interesting because I do need to say something else about my personal journey, just so you understand this.
And you're okay for the recording?
Oh yes. When I resigned from the actual ministry of the Methodist Church in 1976, and so I was a clergyman when I started here, and that resignation was traumatic for me, and because it was a serious commitment, and which I had intended to maintain, regardless of what I was actually doing. I'd intended to maintain the commitment. I have in the middle of '79, I went on sabbatical leave to the UK, and I had some time and space to get away from Australia and everything, and so when I came back, I joined the parish of St James in King Street in Sydney. That's the one you see on the television every night, outside the law courts.
Yes.
And I'm what's known as a lay reader there. I preach sermons and other things, and I've done various kinds of educational things there. But that also led me to do some research and writing on the role of religion and Christianity in social welfare, and so I've published things about that. And because I think that much of the structure or the motivation of social welfare arrangements in countries like Australia, with the kind of European background that we have been derived from Christian roots, and not only in terms of ideas and values, but in terms of actual structures and welfare organisations. And some of the most significant welfare organisations in Australia derive from that, from church-based organisations. So they're really, really important, and I thought that was an important thing to do. But there are two things that have arisen out of that have affected some of the things that I do, and it's two things from Saint Augustine of Hippo, his huge work, The City of God, which he's contrasting the city of man with the city of God, and so he tells the story of the emperor who captured a pirate, and the pirate stood the emperor up and he said, I have ships and I capture people and rob them, and you have ships and you get out there and you capture people and take their things, and the only difference between the two of us is that you're more powerful than I am. And the point of this in St. Augustine's work is the use of power without justice is wrong. And that's the point of the story.
Yes.
That if the pirate acknowledged he wasn't interested in justice, but he was standing up the emperor, because that was the emperor's job, was to use the power in relation to the promotion of justice. And that's a guiding principle of mine. Power has to be used justly. The other one is the story of the judge. And the judge was trying this person, and he, as was customary in the time, put the person to torture in order to get him to tell the truth. And in the end, the torture killed the person. So St. Augustine says, here is the judge who put this person to torture to discover the truth, and the person died, and the judge still didn't know the truth. And he said, so this story is, to me, is about how you approach people in the first instance. In the justice system that St. Augustine was talking about, the assumption was that everybody was a liar. And you had to put them to the torture to make them tell the truth. But you never did get the truth.
I see it.
And so the best thing to do, is what I do, is to think that fundamentally people tell the truth.
Yes.
And what you have to establish is whether on occasion they've not told you the truth, or more importantly, why they're not telling you the truth. So this is a fundamental attitude towards people.
Yes.
And how you respect people.
Yes.
And now both those things I think are guiding lights for me.
And so powerful, but also so poignant as a reflection of your career and contributions to social work.
Yeah.
Education, practice, policy and research. So thank you so much, Michael, for your service to the profession, to the discipline here at the University of Sydney. It's been a delight being able to have this conversation with you and to now share this with the world.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you.